Chapter 1923 Accidental Injury. Chapter 1923 Accidental Injury. Though Yang Xianlu was very wary of the young girl's strength, in the face of a supreme fortune, how could he stand aside? "Miss, who are you?" Yang Xianlu was the first to move. From the very beginning, he had not planned to allow anyone else to have the great fortune granted by the Celestial King. This was meant to be his, and the only reason why he had widely invited the prodigies in the world was just to stimulate a resonance from the heaven and earth of this place. Of course, it was also for an important matter that he was currently plotting. This time, Yang Xianlu no longer stayed on the defense. With him actively moving to attack, his battle prowess became even stronger. All the strands of his black hair actually became gradually transparent, turning into streaks of aura of great Tao, his whole person becoming incredibly ethereal. He had a celestial Tao physique. Both Shan Jitong and Laro Song paled in shock. They already knew how strong Yang Xianlu was. In fact, it was highly possible that even with the two of them working together, they were still no match for him. However, after he actively drew on the power of his divine fetus, only then did they realize just how wide the gap was between him and them. So it turned out that this was Yang Xianlu's true strength. Their Tao hearts suffered a blow, but they immediately recovered their confidence. No matter how strong his power of divine fetus was, it only allowed Yang Xianlu to have an advantage before the Celestial King tier, but once he became a Celestial King, all regulations would be equal, and it would depend on who had a stronger grasp of regulations, and used their regulations better. Clearly, without a unique opportunity, it would be very difficult for them to catch up to Yang Xianlu in terms of battle prowess before the Celestial King tier, but it should be known that the Celestial King tier was the true starting line for monarch tiers like them. So what if you could smile for now? What was most important was the person who could laugh last. It was not like there were no such cases in this world. Some prodigy would shine for a moment, invincible among his peers from the severing mundane tier all the way to the ascending origin tier, but after becoming a Celestial King, he was stagnant on first heaven, not even managing to advance into second heaven. For such a Celestial King, no matter how awesome his battle prowess was in a battle of equals, would he be able to match a third heaven Celestial King? However, from the look of things now, Yang Xianlu was definitely invincible. If there was anyone left in this world that could match him, it was really hard for them to imagine what they would be like, and to speak of surpassing Yang Xianlu? That was even more impossible. This should be power that was truly invincible in the severing mundane tier. Peng. They had not even finished that thought when they saw the young girl had already rushed over like a primeval beast, without dodging or evading she just simply rampaged over. Then, with a wave of the young girl's fist, Yang Xianlu was sent flying. He flew, he flew, he flew. Even someone as strong as Yang Xianlu was actually no match for her. The mouths of Shan Jitong and Laro Song gaped widely, big enough to fit an egg. Their faces bore expressions of utter shock. How could this be possible? No, it was not that there was really such a huge gap between Yang Xianlu and the young girl, but rather that this young girl belonged to the power category, and in a head-on confrontation, she was incomparably domineering and fierce. Even so, they could still tell how strong this young girl was. She was practically heaven-defying. And then, the two of them felt gloomy. That was because the young girl did not even pause, and rushed towards them. Without the slightest bit of reservation, she treated them like foes she had to crush. Peng, peng, and it was another 2 punches. They hurriedly stretched out an arm to parry, but only felt the surging of a frightening force, as if the young girl was not a human being, but rather a most ancient source beast. When the force of her power surged past, they were involuntarily sent flying as well. Fuck, why did she beat them? What did they do? The young girl stormed over, and behind her was the terrifying army of manifestations. Their numbers were so high that even though Yang Xianlu and the others had suffered a little, they dared not chase the young girl for revenge. If they wanted revenge, they would have to get through the army of manifestations first. Just ask, who would dare fight so many enemies that were equal in cultivation level to them head-on? The Tao achieving stone of the Celestial King, Yang Xianlu and the others all looked depressed. After so much difficulty, they had finally made it here, yet their great opportunity was actually snatched away by a mysterious young girl. They felt great resentment. But when the young girl rushed over, she directly ignored that celestial stone. Instead, she continued to run forwards, and arrived at the peak's summit. This was already the absolute summit, and there were only white hazy clouds and fog in the surrounding, not a single person or object in sight. What on earth is going on? Yang Xianlu and the others were once again dumbfounded. What was going on with this young girl? You had already sent the three of them flying, yet completely ignored the celestial stone? Was this a mockery of them? Ling Han! Ling Han! The young girl cupped her hands at both sides of her mouth, calling out loudly at the top of the peak. This naturally was Hunyao, but now that she had stopped, countless manifestations immediately caught up with her. Like thirsty horses drinking from a stream, they all pounced at her. Multiple figures flew forwards, instantly submerging her in their numbers. Yang Xianlu and the others were repeatedly numbed with shock, rendered incoherent with their astonishment, and completely deranged. Was there something wrong with you? Though you were indeed very strong, and it was very possible that not even Yang Xianlu was a match for you, but still, having so many manifestations attack you at once, even 10 Yang Xianlu would probably be thrashed and devastated. How would you be able to block that? And you actually still stopped. They really didn't know what to say at this point. You managed to reach the 5th severance even with such intelligence or the lack thereof, and you were actually a top-tier monarch tier at that. This was practically dragging down their standards. Boom. Yet just at this moment, a streak of light shot out from within the ball formed by manifestations. Then, a second streak, a third streak, and in an instant, it had become millions and millions of streaks of light. An endless might reverberated. Peng, all the manifestations were sent flying, and were then reduced to dust by the streaks of light. Hunyao reappeared. Clapping her hands, she appeared to be slightly displeased. Niu hasn't found Ling Han yet, and is currently unhappy, and you guys actually dare come to cause trouble, how despicable. Her eyes swept over the surroundings, ferocity flickering in her eyes. The look caused the hearts of Yang Xianlu and the others to jolt. They felt an urge to dodge. But how could a monarch tier lose his fighting spirit? All three of them were unafraid, and engaged in a staring contest with Hunyao. Hunyao was furious, and demanded, "You guys looking at Niu like this, are you asking for a fight?" Instantly, Yang Xianlu and the others were speechless. "You were the one glaring at us, all right? How can you say that now?" However, what was the technique that the young girl had used just now? She had actually destroyed all the manifestations in an instant. This was too ruthless, wasn't it? Even a Yang soul, or even Yin soul elite could not possibly do that, right? Earth soul might barely be capable of it, and only a heaven soul could crush his opponents with a flip of his hand. This young girl was clearly only a 5th severance, yet possessed the battle prowess of a heaven soul? Impossible. They admitted that Hunyao was very strong, but they definitely did not think that her battle prowess could be so high. It had to be that Hunyao had used some kind of rare treasure. Yi, this seems like a valuable treasure. Hunyao looked at the celestial stone on the ground, and her eyes immediately shone. Pa, pa, pa. She ran towards the celestial stone. Not bad, not bad. I can give this to Ling Han as a gift. Miss. Yang Xianlu could not help but speak up. This does not belong to you yet. You people want to snatch Niu's belongings? Niu turned to look at the three of them, the violence in her eyes clear to see, as if she was a tigress that was protecting her food. Shan Jitong and Laro Song were definitely about to experience a mental breakdown because whatever others did, in the end, they would definitely be treated the same by Hunyao. Previously, they had clearly not been blocking the way, yet they had still been sent flying with a punch. And now, they clearly did not say anything, yet were still injured accidentally by Hunyao. They were really too innocent. Chapter 1924, The Rock Shows Its Might. Chapter 1924, The Rock Shows Its Might. Miss, I wish to ask for some guidance from you. Yang Xianlu's fighting spirit blazed as hot as fire. Hunyao was indeed very strong, and was in fact stronger than even him, but the path of a monarch tier meant that one would have to defeat opponents that could not possibly be defeated the entire way, and finally set foot on the absolute pinnacle. He knew that there was a gap between him and a few heaven-defying freaks. This celestial king achieving Tao Stone was his chance to make up for the gap between them. Thus, how could he possibly allow another to have it? You try to snatch Nyo's stuff, and still want to fight with Nyo? When Hu Nyo became unreasonable, she was also very brutal. She glared harshly at Yang Xianlu, and pointed at him. Nyo wants to beat you up. She took the initiative to move. Boom, a pair of wings sprouted from her back. They were made up of seals of great Tao, exuding an ancient and noble air. Ancestor Rock. Shan Jitong and Laro Song exclaimed simultaneously. As it turned out, this young girl was the heir of the line of the Ancestor Rock. Amongst the ancestral sources, the Ancestor Rock definitely could be considered of the first ranking. It was no wonder the young girl's speed was so fast. Otherwise, if it had been any other fifth severance, she would have long since been caught up by these manifestations. Sure, as Hu Nyo's wings flapped, she had already appeared in front of Yang Xianlu, and shot out a punch. There was no technique or reason about it. It was like saying, I am just going to beat you up with a single punch. Yang Xianlu showed a sliver of anger. He was a top-tier prodigy, a divine fetus that was born on the celestial path, and it was suspected that he had been born from heaven and nurtured by earth. Within the same cultivation level, no one was allowed to insult him. He clearly knew that Hu Nyo's power was fierce and domineering. It was better for him not to face her head-on in a confrontation, but with Hu Nyo so simply and directly launching an offensive at him, if he did not dare take her on head-on, it would really be too embarrassing for him. He could lose, but his will could not. This was the pride that belonged to a monarch tier. Yet Hu Nyo was completely unconcerned. When her fist fell, another seal of great Tao lit up, and it was only a single one too. Furthermore, it was not complete, either, becoming the image of a giant fish. Though it was incomplete, this seal was too frightening. It was as if the heavens had collapsed, the earth itself was trembling, and even a strange scene had risen in the world due to the power of this seal. This was too terrifying, wasn't it? No, it's not the Ancestor Rock. Laro Song swallowed with much difficulty. The rock. Shan Jitong quipped at the same time, his eyes similarly widened. He was stunned beyond description. When the world was first created, the earliest batch of living beings had all become celestial king tier in level, and they were known as source beasts. Some source beasts had already died in the endless passage of time, while some had attained an even higher level. There were differences in strength even among source beasts. Ancestor Rock, that was one of the first ranking level, but above the first rank, there was still another level, king tier. For example, Ancestor Dragon, Ancestor Phoenix, and the Rock were of king tier level. According to legends, there were as many as over 20 types of king tier source beasts, but there were only 10 races that could still appear now, and every single one of these races had world-shaking mighty figures. Ninth Heaven Celestial King. There were 9 heavens in the Celestial King tier, and every single step forward was as difficult as ascending the heavens. In front a 9th Heaven Celestial King, even an 8th Heaven Celestial King was a junior. This kind of overwhelming superiority was like a dividing soul tier towards a severing mundane tier. Hence, even though Yang Xianlu was the heir of an 8th Heaven Celestial King, compared to the other party, he paled in color, and the other two completely did not even have the right to compare to Hu Nyo. They were merely heirs from 6th Heaven and 7th Heaven Celestial King, respectively, and a gulf who knew how vast existed between them. Peng. Hu Nyo and Yang Xianlu exchanged blows. This was a clash of great Tao and regulations. Two completely different kinds of great Tao and regulations vibrated, forming a frightening shock wave, and then Yang Xianlu stepped back continuously. This time, he had not been sent flying, but he was not any better, either. He retreated all the way until about 300 meters before he finally managed to stop his retreat. The rock, if it was flying, it would be above the 9 heavens, incredibly agile, and if it was swimming, it would be overwhelmingly powerful without comparison. This was a source beast that contained both absolute power and speed. Otherwise, how could it possibly be ranked in the king tier? Extreme power. Yang Xianlu stated closely. There was not the slightest despondency in his eyes, only an even higher fighting spirit. He had been sent into a retreat by the other party, But it was not truly because his battle prowess was no match for hers, but rather that the regulations that the other had cultivated represented the absolute apex of power. There were only a rare few source beasts that could contest with the rock in terms of force. The ancestor dragon was one, and then was there anything else? However, power was only just a portion of battle prowess. He had a celestial Tao physique, and he would not lose. Again, he roared, completely unleashing his power of divine fetus. It was as if he had become an embodiment of great Tao. To clash in this heaven and earth, he had the absolute initiative. Because he practically was the Tao of heaven and earth. Whatever movements his opponent made could not be hidden from him, and he himself was more so able to immerse in great Tao, so how could you be able to wound him? Would you be able to damage the Tao of heaven and earth? You couldn't, then how could you deal him any damage? In the first place, Hunyou's violent nature was hard to tame, and now, angered like this, she immediately pounced. She still threw out a simple punch, and it was still an incomplete seal, yet it could suppress the heaven and earth, and was practically invincible. Peng! Yang Xianlu was instantly hit, and sent flying like a shooting star. That was right. He had a celestial Tao physique, and when the power of his divine fetus activated, he was practically one and the same as the Tao of heaven and earth. The moment you moved, he would know, and then he would be able to calmly dodge. In fact, because he was fused within great Tao, how could one be able to wound him? But Hunyou's speed was too fast, so fast that it had exceeded Yang Xianlu's reaction time. If you wanted to sense great Tao, you would need time, right? When this message was sent over, only then would you be able to act accordingly. However, Hunyou's speed had surpassed the time this message took to be sent. Thus, Yang Xianlu had just sensed which angle Hunyou was going to attack from, and he had already been hit solidly with a punch. There was absolutely no time for him to dodge or fuse within great Tao at all. The pinnacle level of speed. The reason why the rock could become a source beast of king tier level was because it did not just possess the pinnacle of one type of regulations. Too shoddy, so boring. Hunyou clapped her hands. Then, she looked towards Shan Jitong and Laro Song, her ferocious gaze appearing once more. Shan Jitong and Laro Song hurriedly shook their heads. Even Yang Xianlu had been easily sent flying. They naturally were even less of a match. They had better not trifle with Hunyou, either. You guys are too weak, even more boring, Hunyou said, and walked towards the Celestial King achieving Tao Stone. Both Shan Jitong and Laro Song felt an urge to throw up blood. Though they were indeed a little weak, they were still monarch tiers here, and they did have their pride. Hunyou giggled as she walked to the side of the Celestial Stone. Stretching out both arms, she wrapped them around the stone, wanting to uproot it by force, and stow it away into her spatial god tool or something so she could present it to Ling Han as a gift. Yi, so strange, why did something make its way in? She was surprised. Oh no, why is the stone stuck on my hands? She cried out loudly, not having the slightest bit of reservedness that an exquisite beauty should have. She was still that little girl who was mischievous and liked to create trouble from years ago. She actually couldn't fling this stone away. Don't want it, I don't want it anymore, it really isn't anything good. Hunyou tried earnestly to throw the celestial stone away, but this thing seemed to have taken root in her body. No matter how hard she tried, she could not throw it down. Seeing this scene, Yang Xianlu and the others very much wanted to cry. If you don't want it, we do. But the celestial stone was already beginning to channel. A boundless source power of heaven and earth was entering into Hunyou's body, improving her physique, and pushing it in a direction that was closer to great Tao. Hunyou stopped the meaningless struggle, and allowed the celestial stone to take effect. Her expression was one of struggle, looking extremely disgusted. Fuck. Chapter 1925, Finally Meeting. Chapter 1925, Finally Meeting. The gloom in the hearts of Yang Xianlu and the others really could not be described. But what could be done? The Celestial King achieving Tao Stone had already been taken by Hunyou, and she had already used it. There couldn't possibly be a second person that could benefit from it. Where exactly had this little girl popped out of? Breathtakingly beautiful, yet she was also indescribably mischievous. It was very hard to imagine that an exquisite beauty actually had this kind of personality. The celestial stone shone brighter and brighter. In fact, it had even surpassed that sun in the skies that the eternal prosperity celestial king had created, but when the brilliance had reached the extreme, it only lasted for 10 breaths before the celestial stone dimmed, and did not have the slightest sliver of light any longer, as if it was an ordinary rock. It was indeed an ordinary stone now. Years ago, the eternal prosperity celestial king had left behind a sliver of source power, and boosted by the heaven and earth over an epoch, all the benefits had entered into Hunyo's body. The stone dropped onto the ground, like it was a normal stone. *TTY stone. *TTY stone. Hunyo was furious, stomping on it with her foot repeatedly. That was how angry she was. To actually dare stick to her so much that she could not even fling it away. It was despicable. As she stomped, she slanted her head slightly as she mumbled to herself, however, my physique seems to have improved a bit. Just improved a bit. Yang Xianlu and the others were astounded. That was the celestial king achieving Dao Stone, and it had been boosted by the heaven and earth for an epoch, at that. It was even capable of turning a mortal into an immortal, and even for them, it had boundless benefits. But you actually only had a bit of improvement. If Hunyo was not lying, that meant that her physique was close to reaching the pinnacle, and that was why the celestial stone practically did not have anything to improve on. But did Hunyo look like the type that would tell a lie? Hence, Yang Xianlu and the others were all transfixed with shock, and finally knew how Hunyo was so strong. They were all at the 5th severance, and one with a stronger physique did indeed possess an incredible advantage, especially one with the bloodline of the rock. That was the strongest source beast in this world. Nyo will just wait for Ling Han here. Hunyo found a large rock to sit on, and looked gentle and quiet, only delicate and beautiful, lacking any sliver of the mischievous nature she had shown. However, only an instant later, she was kicking rocks in her boredom, no longer bearing the image of a gentle lady. When Hunyo took the celestial king achieving Dao Stone, a sudden disturbance appeared in the air on the mountain, and then it returned to a peaceful state. Though there was still tremendous pressure, the fog no longer took the form of manifestations. In this way, everyone's speed was greatly increased. Looks like the fortune should have been taken by someone, Ling Han said. This was an instinctive feeling. The Empress nodded. That was what she thought too. However, for the two of them, breaking through to the 5th severance was their greatest fortune, and had surpassed all else. Though they still felt that it was a little bit of a pity now, their rewards had already far exceeded any regrets they might feel. Who knows, it may be Hunyo, Ling Han said smilingly. This girl was very energetic. Even if he and the Empress had entered into the Black Tower for comprehension, Hunyo could still catch up to them. Then, it was not an impossible matter for her to be able to attain the first place. The two of them maintained an even speed, and were adjusting to the frightening power they had attained after their breakthrough. From the 4th severance to the 5th severance, this step was really too wide. Initially, they could quickly adjust through the battles with the manifestations, but while they battled, the manifestations had suddenly disappeared. Thus, they were still a little way away from fully adapting. Their speed was not fast, and those behind them naturally caught up with them, surpassing them one after another day. Half a day later, Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the summit. Zhu Shuega jumped out, pointing a finger at Ling Han. He had initially wanted to battle with Ling Han, yet a surprising turn of events had taken place, and he had consequently fought with another instead. He had been enjoying the battle at the time, and had forgotten the matter of Ling Han. Now that he was free, he naturally remembered it. There were some people that would not hold a grudge just because they were prodigies. What do you want? Ling Han turned to look towards him, a faint smile curling up the corners of his lips. Previously, he was not afraid of the other, and now that he had advanced into the 5th severance, he was confident he could put up a fight even against Yang Xianlu, so he would consider Zhu Shuega even less of an equal match. Fight me. Zhu Shuega charged over with large strides. Ling Han. A feminine exclamation rang out, and a beautiful figure charged over. Yet, like she was a primordial beast, she bulldozed everything in her way. Out of the way! Out of the way! Hunyo hollered loudly. What? Zhu Shuega was just taking large strides when he was unexpectedly sent flying by a fist. His whole person was sprawled out in the air, and then rapidly became a tiny dot, which then disappeared without a trace. Ling Han. Hu Niu pounced, leaping into Ling Han's arms all of a sudden, and hanging on Ling Han like a monkey. However, she was as beautiful as a celestial maiden, so it would not ruin the image, and would only make others feel incredibly envious of Ling Han. Ling Han smiled, embracing this little girl back. They had not seen each other for another several centuries, and he similarly missed her dearly. Ling Han, did you miss Hu Niu? Hu Niu asked delicately, as if there was no one around. She was completely unconcerned with how those around her thought of her. It was just too unfortunate for Zhu Shuega. By now, Hu knew where he had been thrown off to. I missed my Niu, Ling Han said. Hu Niu was very pleased, her pretty face all smiles as she planted a strong kiss on Ling Han's cheek. Ling Han, let's have kids. This little girl, she still had not the slightest concept of embarrassment. Ahem. The Empress coughed lightly, her face bearing a stern expression. Another witch. Hu Niu turned her head, and involuntarily bared her teeth, showing an expression of ferocity. She was filled with animosity. Yi, Niu seems to have seen you before. When she had seen the Empress, that was only a doppelganger, and while the appearance was different, they had the same aura. Hu Niu wrapped herself around Ling Han, unwilling to get down, as she turned her head, and asked, Ling Han, who is this witch? We're a family, Ling Han replied with a smile. Humph, Niu doesn't want to be family with her. Hu Niu's eyes were set on the Empress, her glare blazing with killing intent, not bothering to conceal it in the slightest. The Empress was unafraid, and similarly fixed her gaze on Hu Niu. The two women simultaneously blazed with a fiery fighting spirit. In their eyes, it was most important for them to settle the other and become the most important person by Ling Han's side, which had in fact surpassed all else in importance. Cough, since everyone has arrived, let us sit down, and study cultivation together. Yang Xianlu adjusted his emotions. In his opinion, the reason he had lost to Hu Niu was because of the difference in their physique, and physique would only be an advantage before Celestial King tier. After advancing into Celestial King tier, all the regulations in the world would be equal. He could meet his gains or losses bravely, and had already walked out of the shadow that came from his previous loss. He was already able to face it frankly. He had gathered everyone here this time not purely for the sake of the Celestial King achieving Dao Stone. There was another extremely important motive, and it absolutely could not be affected because of just a little accident that had happened previously. Hence, he naturally could not allow Hu Niu and the Empress to continue their little spat of envy. Thus, he stepped out to interrupt the two women from continuing their glaring match. Shut up. Hu Niu and the Empress both turned their heads, their bearing fierce. Yang Xianlu. Chapter 1926, There is a wider world out there. Chapter 1926, There is a wider world out there. Shut up. There was actually someone that dared tell Yang Xianlu to shut up to his face. Hiss, everyone inhaled sharply, an expression of disbelief on their faces. It was not just one, but two. How brazen, just who were these two women? But since they had been able to come here, they had to be top-notch emperor tiers. Could it be that they did not have any idea that they had to treat Yang Xianlu very respectfully? To say nothing of the fact that he was the heir of an 8th heaven celestial king, he himself was a monarch tier. Was that not enough? But what was even more shocking to the rest was that after Yang Xianlu had been yelled at, he was actually not angered. He merely shook his head, and looked exasperated. It had to be that Yang Xianlu, as a gentleman, was unwilling to clash with women. But it was not everyone that thought this. They looked at Hu Niu. This was a person that they had not seen before. If top-notch emperor tiers like them could not remember even this, then they were really unworthy of being called emperor tiers. This young girl had come uninvited, and Yang Xianlu actually did not fly into a fury. What was the meaning of this? She is that demonic girl. *TTY girl. Someone had recognized Hu Niu. These were the several people that Hu Niu had surpassed on her way. Though there were many paths to the summit, there were quite a number of people here too. Thus, after Hu Niu had chosen one path, It was definite that a considerable number of people would be surpassed by her, and they naturally were terribly wed over. All of a sudden, at least 10 people set their eyes on Hunyo, all of them burning with fury. Though Hunyo was world-shakingly beautiful, she had a completely different style from the Empress. The Empress was noble and poised, and thought that everyone in this world should submit to her, exuding a pride that was deeply embedded into her very bones. Hunyo was wild and willful, and the little actions that she showed were extremely mischievous. It was like she was a child that had not grown up. And precisely because of this, Hunyo did not have as strong a bearing, or as captivating a beauty as the Empress. In truth, if the Empress did what Hunyo had done, there would probably be very few that could truly become angry with her. Of course, the Empress was not one to do something so risky. Hunyo bared her teeth like a female panther that was raging. "What is it? You guys want to fight?" Those dozen-plus people naturally were even more infuriated. "Because of you, we were stomped over by 100 over manifestations, and you actually do not feel even the slightest bit apologetic. Hey, everyone, please calm your anger." Yang Xianlu stepped out, and pressed his hands down slightly. "Listen to me for a while as I tell you about the reason why I have invited everyone here." He was probably also very depressed now. If it had been in the past, he definitely would have been the center that everyone revolved around. He only had to say one word, and everyone would be attentively looking at him. What need would be there for him to repeat his words multiple times? But Hunyo was too strong. Even if he used his ultimate technique, Hunyo had hers too, and furthermore, it was incredibly terrifying at that. In an instant, she had destroyed thousands of manifestations in a single move. His was far inferior to this. However, Yang Xianlu was Yang Xianlu, after all. When he said so, everyone had suppressed their anger, at least for the moment. Hunyo wanted to glare again, yet Linghan rubbed her head. Instantly, she showed an expression of enjoyment, no longer bearing a grudge against them. Everyone clicked their tongues in amazement at this sight. Hunyo was so fierce, but in front of Linghan, she was so docile. This was really something that they could not conceive. However, at the same time, they were filled with envy towards Linghan. After all, putting aside the ferocious nature of Hunyo, she was still a great beauty that was unmatched in her exquisiteness. Moreover, in front of Linghan, wasn't this exquisite beauty also very gentle? "Why is that I can't find this kind of woman?" Hunyo continued her glaring contest with the Empress. With Linghan on the sidelines, it was definite that they would not be able to come to blows, but the battle between them had already begun. The reason why I have invited everyone here is primarily to form an alliance. Yang Xianlu finally announced the main topic. Ha 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 ha. Shan Jitong immediately erupted into raucous laughter. "Alliance? What a joke. You want me to become allies with this trash?" His eyes swept over those assembled, filled with utter disdain towards them. Of course, when his eyes passed over Hunyo, his pupils dilated a little. It was as if Hunyo's fierceness was still in front of his eyes. Yang Xianlu's gaze became stern, and he said, "Brother Shan, if you have a disagreement about this, you may leave immediately. There is no need for you to be derisive and snide. However, I can tell you that you will definitely regret that action." Shan Jitong faltered, showing an expression of hesitation. Should he immediately leave without a backward glance, or stay and listen? If he stayed, that would be a little embarrassing for him, but Yang Xianlu actually declared something like he would regret it if he left. Then, he had to be very certain of that. Monarchs like them would definitely not blurt nonsense in this kind of situation. After hesitating for a long time, Shan Jitong still chose to sit back down on the rock he was initially perched on. He had made his decision. He was definitely not going to speak again later on. Even if Shan Jitong had embarrassed himself, how could the others dare to laugh at him? They all remained expressionless, acting as if they had not seen anything. Only Laro Song smirked coldly, expressing his contempt for Shan Jitong. "How fun." Hunyo meanwhile clapped, her voice crisp and cheery. Shan Jitong only acted as if he had not heard her. He closed his eyes. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. Everyone clicked their tongues in amazement. It was as if Yang Xianlu and Shan Jitong had both repressed themselves in the treatment of this young girl, which made the others even more curious. Who exactly was this young girl? This time, Yang Xianlu was a little thankful to Hu Niu. Even he could not possibly completely suppress Shan Jitong, but Hu Niu could. True enough, a fierce person needed another fierce person to deal with him. The celestial realm is colossal. Merely the boundless seas have separated the Eastern Celestial Realm and Western Celestial Realm, and our Eastern Celestial Realm is further divided into 33 heavens. Yang Xianlu began to explain some geographical information. Because of this, some showed expressions of impatience. Had they come to listen to this? But there were also many others whose expressions did not change. How could it be possible that those who could become top-notch emperor tiers did not even have this little bit of patience? Moreover, would Yang Xianlu talk about this for no reason? Our calm peace heaven, to be honest, can only be ranked at the bottom of the 33 heavens, having the same rank as wide prosperity heaven and far west heaven, Yang Xianlu stated calmly. When the overall level of strength of the Western Celestial Realm is also superior to the Eastern Celestial Realms, our calm peace heaven can only be ranked last in the entire Celestial Realm. Some time ago, I decided to travel around in the Western Celestial Realm, but in the end, I did not embark on the journey. Instead, I went to the wide prosperity heaven, and decided to train there first. In the end, I encountered an opponent that I was no match for. All of a sudden, the masses erupted in uproar. Who was Yang Xianlu? A divine fetus that was born on the celestial path, a being that very possibly could have been birthed from heaven and nurtured by earth. He should have been an ultimate monarch tier that was invincible among his peers, so how could he have possibly been defeated? Brother Yang, it must be that opponent's cultivation level is too high, right? Someone immediately piped up with a smile, hoping against hope. Yang Xianlu shook his head, and replied, that's not the case. That person was the same as me, a fifth severance as well. When these words left his mouth, everyone was silenced. Shan Jitong opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately could not say anything. He was very defiant, yet had a good measure of himself. His battle prowess should be inferior compared to Yang Xianlu's, so if even Yang Xianlu was no match, what was he worth then? Lao Song was much calmer. Only his flirtatious eyes became even narrower, making him look more like a poisonous serpent. That person's name is Shishouwen, Yang Xianlu continued. According to him, in the wide prosperity heaven, he can only be ranked 9th in terms of strength. Pu, a considerable number spluttered. Impossible. Definitely impossible. With how strong Yang Xianlu was, he had actually been defeated by someone who was merely ranked 9th in the wide prosperity heaven. How could this be believed? Chapter 1927, Fiery Flame Lightning Strike Wood. Chapter 1927, Fiery Flame Lightning Strike Wood. Even Ling Han was interested now. Yang Xianlu's strength was undoubted, but this kind of powerful prodigy was actually no match for someone that only ranked 9th in another place. That was a little hard to imagine. Most importantly, Yang Xianlu had been exaggerated too much. Just how many people could be intimidated by merely the words of being born on the celestial path? Added with the fact that he was a true disciple of an 8th heaven celestial king, and was qualified to attain the 9th heaven in the future, his defeat was unthinkable and unacceptable. It should be known that Yang Xianlu had always been considered as the strongest in the severing mundane tier. In fact, once he advanced into the dividing soul tier, he would not need too long to be considered as the strongest below the immortal palace tier. Lao Song couldn't help but ask, Brother Yang, the wide prosperity heaven is actually that strong? The celestial realm was so huge, and merely the calm peace heaven was enough for someone to spend tens of billions of years exploring. Which of the young prodigies gathered here had not passed the age of 1 billion? Regarding the wide prosperity heaven, all they knew about it was hearsay. Yang Xianlu nodded, and replied, that is indeed the case. How could that be? Shan Jitong also broke the silence. The wide prosperity heaven is ranked equal with our calm peace heaven. There is practically no difference in the overall level of cultivation. How could such a massive disparity appear in this generation? Yang Xianlu shook his head, and answered, I am not sure. My master has probably guessed the reason, but when I asked about it, master's expression was extremely solemn, and he said that the wide prosperity heaven has made a very great sacrifice for the celestial realm, so it was not strange that they would be boosted by fortune in this way. Everyone heard this, and inadvertently was even more confused. What did having made a great sacrifice for the celestial realm mean? What was the sacrifice? Furthermore, how had they sacrificed themselves? It was all completely baffling. But would the eternal prosperity celestial king speak random nonsense? They didn't understand what he meant by sacrifice, but at least they understood that the reason why so many prodigies had appeared in this generation of wide prosperity heaven was because they had been boosted by fortune from heaven and earth. For example, a few more divine fetuses had appeared, and they were all super divine fetuses, like time element and space element. In fact, there were some that had both. Hence, in a battle of equals, they would definitely have a greater advantage. In fact, after Celestial King tier, everyone's cultivation level would be the same. For example, if they were both at second heaven, yet you grasped 3 types of regulations, which was equivalent to 3 second heaven Celestial Kings, then you would definitely be stronger than they who only grasped 1 type of Celestial King tier regulations. Regulations were the strongest weapon that a Celestial had. Brother Yang, the reason why you have invited us here is to stand off against the wide prosperity heaven, someone asked. When they heard so much, everyone could guess at some clue. Yang Xianlu shook his head, but then nodded, and answered, yes and no. He continued, close to 100 million years ago, my master discovered a mystery realm that was naturally formed from heaven and earth, and within, there was a source power of heaven and earth that was being nurtured. Furthermore, it is close to maturity. He paused for a moment. As expected, he saw everyone's breath quicken in excitement. Source power of heaven and earth could be said to be a treasure that was the most valuable in the whole world. Even a celestial king would be tempted. Allowing one to observe the regulations of heaven and earth from an endlessly close distance was very significant for those who had not reached the celestial king tier. Furthermore, a source power could help one in battle. The strength of it would depend on the situation because while a source power of heaven and earth was celestial king tier in level, it could possibly be only first heaven in level, but could also possibly reach 9th heaven. In summary, if one could obtain a source power of heaven and earth in the severing mundane tier, that would be too terrifying. Because this source power of heaven and earth was still being nurtured, my master did not retrieve it. Furthermore, after my master did some observation, he discovered that this natural mystery realm was extremely frightening. Aside from a 9th heaven celestial king being able to barge in by force, even if an existence like an 8th heaven celestial king dared to be rash, he would still be killed by heaven and earth. Not only are celestial kings bound by this restriction, even the ascending origin tier, immortal palace tier, and dividing soul tier elites have no way of entering. It is as if the heaven and earth are biased, and wish to gift this fortune only to severing mundane tiers. When Yang Xianlu finished saying these words, he very naturally discovered everyone showed an expression of excitement that could not be suppressed. Even Laro Song and Shan Jitong could not hide their excitement. Brother Yang, I fear the matter is not as simple as that, right? Ling Han spoke up. If this source power of heaven and earth could be so easily obtained, then what need was there for Yang Xianlu to inform them? He could directly go by himself to retrieve it. Moreover, why had he deliberately spoken of the wide prosperity heaven just now? There was no one stupid here, and they all came to the realization. Yang Xianlu nodded slowly, and answered, that's right. There is also a celestial king from wide prosperity heaven that has discovered this natural mystery realm, and also found out that this source power of heaven and earth exists. Thus, when the mystery realm opens, the wide prosperity heaven will also be contesting with us for it. Hearing these words, everyone's expressions changed. Previously, Yang Xianlu had already said that even the severing mundane tier ranked 9th in wide prosperity heaven could defeat him, then even if Yang Xianlu was ranked 10th, there were actually so many heaven-defying freaks in the whole wide prosperity heaven. Then what was the point of contesting? Thus, we have to unite, Yang Xianlu said. I have a formation technique with me that can be used by 10 people. When it channels, not only can it compound upon the battle prowess of all 10 users, It can even increase their battle prowess tenfold. Compound, tenfold. When everyone heard this, they all looked tempted. That so-called Shishouwen definitely could not be 10 times stronger than Yang Xianlu. In fact, even the strongest prodigy of the wide prosperity heaven could not possibly be so powerful. Furthermore, Yang Xianlu was not the only one whose power would be compounded tenfold, but rather it was the united power of the 10 of them. If they really had this kind of formation, there would be no enemy they could not overcome, no battle they could not win. Brother Yang, then after obtaining the source power of heaven and earth, how is it to be shared? Someone asked. Because Yang Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and Larosong were all monarch tiers, who could be a match for them in the severing mundane tier? Yang Xianlu smiled faintly, and replied, how could you retrieve a source power of heaven and earth just because you willed it? It will choose its master on its own. If there is no suitable candidate, it will evade and escape, and there is no possible way that we can compel it by force. Thus, we are only earning a chance for ourselves to appear in front of the source power of heaven and earth so it could make its choice. This will have to depend on how lucky you are. Linghan asked, Brother Yang, after talking for so long, what exactly is this source power of heaven and earth? He already had the source powers of water and fire. If he obtained another source power of heaven and earth of the same elemental alignment, while it would still increase his battle prowess by some, it would not give rise to a fundamental change. Small Tower had said that he should gather as many source powers of heaven and earth as possible before advancing into the Celestial King tier. If he advanced into the Celestial King tier under such conditions, he would be able to rush up to astonishing heights. Thus, if this source power of heaven and earth was of any other element aside from water and fire, he would try as much as possible to make an attempt for it. If it was not, his enthusiasm would be greatly decreased. Furthermore, Yang Xianlu had not spoken wrongly. A source power of heaven and earth could not be simply retrieved just because you wanted to, but rather it would have to depend on whether the source power itself was willing to follow by your side or otherwise. Ling Han already had 2 source powers of heaven and earth in his body. If the third one was still water or fire, the chances of it choosing Ling Han would probably be close to 0. Similarities would repel each other. Yang Xianlu cast a second look at Ling Han. What he was concerned about was not Ling Han's strength, but rather Hu Niu's sweet attitude towards Ling Han. Hu Niu was too powerful, reminding him of the heaven-defying freaks of wide prosperity heaven. He slowly answered, this source power of heaven and earth is of the wood element, the fiery flame lightning strike wood. How strange. Since it was wood element, why was it fiery flame and lightning strike as well? Chapter 1928, A Mere Alchemist. Chapter 1928, A Mere Alchemist. The fiery flame lightning strike wood is born with much suffering. In the process of its growth, it would continuously be burnt by fiery flames and struck by lightning, Yang Xianlu explained. Speaking of numbers, the amount of fiery flame lightning strike wood should number the most amongst all source powers. When a fiery flame lightning strike wood dies, countless fiery flame lightning strike wood would be birthed. However, they would only be young sprouts, and in the meantime, countless of them would die, right until one has successfully grown, and the other sprouts would also wilt and die at the same time. This is a source power of heaven and earth. Thus, even if you can't obtain the approval of the fiery flame lightning strike wood, even if you can only obtain a wilted sprout of fiery flame lightning strike wood, it will be of incredible help for us to comprehend the regulations of wood. He paused, and then continued, what my master discovered was not a single fiery flame lightning strike wood, but rather a whole area, a forest of fiery flame lightning strike wood. A forest made up of fiery flame lightning strike wood, and only one king would stand out among the rest, and become the new source power of heaven and earth. Hearing him say so, those whose enthusiasm was not that high initially all became keen. It was too difficult to have a source power of heaven and earth recognize them as its master basically, only a celestial king could accomplish that, but if they could get a wilted sprout of the fiery flame lightning strike wood, that was indeed also a precious treasure. It was guaranteed that every single ascending origin tier would go mad for it. Ling Han, do you want it? Hu Niu asked from within Ling Han's arms. Niu will snatch it for you. Her eyes shone, not much different from the little girl she had once been. Ling Han involuntarily laughed loudly. Thinking of his various experiences with Hunyeo, an indescribable feeling of bliss rose up in his heart. I want to join as well. Immediately, a great many people volunteered themselves, wanting to join Yang Xianlu's team. Though Shan Jitong and Laro Song were also incredibly tempted, because of their dignified conduct, they did not say it out loud. Instead, they were waiting for Yang Xianlu to take the initiative to invite them. Yet it was as if Yang Xianlu had not picked up on that, and completely ignored their existence. Basically, every person expressed their wish to go to that natural mystery realm. It was not everyone that Yang Xianlu would accept. This formation was capable of compounding the power of 10 people, in fact, and increase their power by tenfold on that basis even. Thus, it would definitely put a tremendous pressure on every single person. Without the support of a powerful physique, there would be no need for their opponent to break the formation, as they themselves would crumble first. As the saying went, better to have nothing than to settle for inferiority. After deliberating for a long while, Yang Xianlu had still only picked out 6 people. Finally, Shan Jitong and Laro Song showed a prideful expression. No matter how strong you, Yang Xianlu, were, you ultimately would still have to offer them an invitation. Miss, are you interested in coming with us? Yang Xianlu turned to look at Hunyeo, issuing an invite. Niu doesn't want to. Hunyeo scowled, glaring at Yang Xianlu. If you dare have ideas about Niu will chop off your dog's head to feed the dogs. Ling Han broke out in a sweat. Wasn't that cannibalism? Yang Xianlu, having courted a rebuff, could only rub his nose. However, Hunyeo was indeed very powerful, and very likely wasn't inferior to Shishouan. Without relying on the formation, she could still match him. However, no matter what, Hunyeo was still from the calm peace heaven, so even if she did not join his team, it was still fine. My master has said that this is an opportunity that belongs to every single person from the calm peace heaven. Thus, I will bring everyone with me when I go. After entering into the mystery realm, I hope everyone can help one another. After all, our enemy is the wide prosperity heaven. Yang Xianlu solemnly declared, if I discover anyone taking the initiative to start internal strife in the mystery realm, then please do not fault me for turning hostile in the future. Naturally, everyone nodded. At present, they were all competitors, but if there was the wide prosperity heaven thrown into the bundle, then they were a whole unit. Their fists should be united against a common external enemy. Brother Yang, could I give you a hand? Laro Song was the first to soften. Yang Xianlu had already raised the topic to the level of the big picture of the entire calm peace heaven. In comparison, his reservedness naturally would appear only coy. Of course, Yang Xianlu said smilingly. Brother Yang, I as well. Shan Jitong could only pipe in, disregarding any notion of embarrassment. Yang Xianlu nodded, and did not pursue the matter or mock Yang Xianlu. He had lofty ambitions, and disdained using such tactics to strike a blow at an opponent. Moreover, he was already the strongest of the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, and there was no need for him to treat Shan Jitong as a rival, either. His target was the other 33 ultimate monarch tiers of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Hunyeo was not willing to join, which made Yang Xianlu slightly disappointed. If one such elite could join their alliance, his chances of victory would be greatly increased. However, looking at how Hunyeo was clinging on to Ling Han, he decided to take a more roundabout route. Ling Han, we finally met. He smiled faintly. Ling Han nodded, and said, I have heard of you, and you haven't disappointed me, either. Hiss, hearing these words from Ling Han, everyone inhaled sharply. What a great boast. As a mere alchemist, where did you get courage to be so arrogant? Yang Xianlu involuntarily became slightly angered as well. Though Zhao Qingfeng had not been killed by Ling Han's hand, it could still be considered Ling Han's fault. Having a subordinate killed, with his personality of protecting his own people, Yang Xianlu was actually already very displeased with Ling Han. However, Ling Han was too young, having astonishing natural talent in alchemy, and his potential in cultivation wasn't too bad, either. That was why he had invited him, as he wished to recruit Ling Han. As he saw it, Now that he, the king of the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, had extended him an olive branch, Ling Han naturally would only scramble over and gladly agree. Now that he had Hunyo backing him up, he had forgotten himself. "Are you willing to join my team?" he asked lowly, and he was asking for Hunyo's sake. Ling Han broke into a grin, and replied, "My temper is a little stubborn. As the saying goes, better be the head of a chicken rather than the tail of a bull. Come, let us have a match. If I win, you all will join me, and I will be your leader." He really wasn't afraid of being forced to eat his own words. But Yang Xianlu was not angered. As he saw it, Ling Han was only an arrogant fool. There was completely no need to take the words of a psycho to heart. He calmly asked, "If you lose? Then I'll just leave without a backwards look." "I already said that I won't be the tail of a bull," Ling Han said with a smile. Everyone was taken aback. "So whichever way, others should listen to you." Ling Han, so awesome. Hunyo planted a kiss on Ling Han's cheek happily. On the sidelines, the Empress similarly had an expression of pride. How could her husband possibly be under someone else's command? What a joke. Yang Xianlu also faltered. "You are really too shameless, aren't you?" His expression darkened, and he replied, "Fine, then let us exchange a few moves." He wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson so that he knew that using powerful connections as an intimidation tactic was a very disgraceful thing. Ling Han patted Hunyo's back, indicating for her to let go of him. No, you can just fight while embracing Nyo like this." Hunyo did not want to let go of her bare hug of Ling Han. At this moment, she did not want to leave Ling Han for even a single instant. Ling Han thought for a while, and just simply walked out like that. For someone that had reached the cultivation level he had, to say nothing of the fact that he had a person in his arms, even if he was carrying 10,000 people, it practically wouldn't affect his battle prowess. Since the little girl was begging like this, he should just satisfy this little wish of hers. "Come." Ling Han crooked a finger at Yang Xianlu. This was issuing a challenge to the strongest person in the severing mundane tier? He was really too relaxed. However, Yang Xianlu did not dare to be careless. He was well aware of how powerful Hunyo could be. If she interfered in the match, the chances of him being defeated were very high. Chapter 1929 Even an alchemist can be that strong? Chapter 1929 Even an alchemist can be that strong? Yang Xianlu strode out, his embroidered robes fluttering. While he was not world-shakingly handsome, his demeanor was graceful and poised, and others could only stare in admiration. Initially, this was a very solemn matter, but there was actually a slender young girl that was hanging on to Yang Xianlu's opponent like she was a koala. No matter how they looked at it, this was a very comical scene. "Did you really want to battle?" Yang Xianlu's expression was dark. At first, his plans were perfect, gathering the united forces of all the prodigies, and unlocking the celestial fortune. He would first obtain the celestial king achieving Dao Stone, and after refining it, he would improve his physique, and then lead everyone on a charge to the mystery realm to contest for the source power of heaven and earth. Obtaining a source power of heaven and earth would mean that he really did not have to fear anyone of the same cultivation level. However, things had gone wrong right from the start. Though he had very quickly suppressed his disappointment, it could not possibly be forgotten just like that. Though it was Hunyo who had obtained the celestial stone, when it came to the root of the matter, it was actually Ling Han's fault. If it was not for Ling Han's sake, how could Hunyo have come here? Old grudges and new resentment made Yang Xianlu especially despise the villain that Ling Han was. Putting on pretenses and using powerful connections as intimidation tactics. He raised his hand level. Wang, the air in the surroundings vibrated, forming a transparent sword in his hand. Only because of the reflection of light did one manage to see clearly the existence of this sword. Ling Han smiled faintly, one arm holding onto Hunyo, while his other hand pushed forwards. His 4 fingers curled inwards into a fist, leaving only a thumb pressing out towards Yang Xianlu. After advancing into the 5th severance, he was his own universe, and every slightest move was his strongest attack. Go! Yang Xianlu slashed out the sword. Abruptly, a brilliance that filled the skies streaked out, dazzling the 9 heavens. Ling Han maintained his move of pressing out his thumb. The millions and millions of stars in his body glowed simultaneously, and he could simply draw on great Tao with a stretch of his hand. As his thumb pressed down, the heaven and earth resonated, turning into a dragon, and then a phoenix appeared. The dragon and phoenix danced together, greeting the incoming sword light. Boom! The sword light crashed into the dragon and phoenix, unleashing an incredibly brilliant light. It was as if a sun had been formed, dazzling the world. When the light completely dispersed, Yang Xianlu and Ling Han were still standing opposite each other. Neither had taken a step back, and neither of them had any sign of being injured. What? Seeing this scene, everyone exploded with shock. Ling Han was actually a match for Yang Xianlu? Hiss, Yang Xianlu was a monarch tier. The fifth severance was much too difficult. In the entire calm peace heaven, there were at least a few hundred celestial king tier sects, and there were close to 20 of fifth heaven and above celestial king tier sects too. As for monarch tiers, at least in the present generation of severing mundane tiers, there were only a mere 3 people who had accomplished it. Monarch tiers naturally should be invincible in the world. However, it was now very possible that a 4th monarch tier had appeared. It was not just very possible, but rather definite. Otherwise, no matter how strong he was, a 4th severance could not possibly take an attack from a 5th severance. That would definitely be a one-sided battle. Realization dawned on everyone. No wonder Ling Han dared to be so arrogant. A monarch tier naturally would be unyielding and obstinate. But weren't you an alchemist? Even an alchemist could be that strong. Fuck. Yang Xianlu's eyes lit up. He was not envious because he had another monarch tier rival. Instead, his fighting spirit blazed brightly. In fact, he felt a kind of gratification. The calm peace heaven was too strong, and there was an urgent need for a few monarch tiers to appear. In the future, only then would it be possible for more celestial kings to appear high-level celestial kings. Otherwise, with how fierce the competition was like in the celestial realm, it was possible that the calm peace heaven would be invaded by other forces, which would lead to a reshuffling of the power balance. Good. Yang Xianlu exclaimed lightly. I previously thought that you were just condescending. It seems like I have had a mistaken opinion of you. I apologize. Ling Han smiled and replied, at first, I, too, thought you were an arrogant person, and now I, too, take back this kind of opinion. You are not too bad yourself. The two of them exchanged a smile, feeling like they would not have befriended if they had not fought. After all, people of talent appreciate one another. There were too few monarch tiers. Every single one could be a very good rival and close friend. Ling Han, don't waste words with him. Defeat him quickly, Niu still wants to kiss with you. Niu wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck, declaring without the slightest notion of embarrassment. She was upright and bold, saying whatever came to mind. Ling Han could only shrug, and said, Brother Yang, then let us set the limit at 10 moves. His impression of Yang Xianlu had changed greatly, so he naturally no longer felt the determination to defeat and stomp on him. All right, 10 moves. Yang Xianlu nodded. He was indeed very proud, but he was a good judge of character as well. What need was there for him to lower himself to deal with emperor tiers and king tiers? Only those who were similarly monarch tiers like him were worthy of being treated as equal by him. This was actually very normal. Ling Han moved, his figure charging out like a shooting star. Yang Xianlu did not show any weakness, either, launching himself into a clash with Ling Han. Peng, peng, peng. Hong, hong, hong. Neither of them held anything back, using one celestial technique after another, and showing fully the strongest facet of themselves. 10 moves very quickly passed, and the two of them stopped at the same time. Exchanging a smile, their old grudges had been wiped clean. This was a kind of appreciation that men had for another that was their equal. Let's descend the peak. They walked side by side, heading towards the foot of the mountain. Because there were no manifestations coming out to cause trouble, their speed naturally was not slow. After 10 days, they had already arrived at the foot of the mountain. Karkaka, brat, you think you can escape from me? Amidst a series of mad cackles, an elder suddenly appeared. Boom, an endless pressure spread out, alerting all 33 heavens. The expressions of all the prodigies changed slightly. They were all emperor tiers and monarch tiers within the same cultivation level, but that was only limited to the same cultivation level. Even if monarch tiers could match yang soul or even yin soul, this elder presently was definitely not a dividing soul tier, but had rather far surpassed that. However, while everyone was shocked, none of them was afraid at all. This was a gathering that was hosted by Yang Xianlu, and there was an 8th heaven celestial king standing behind Yang Xianlu. If someone still came to cause trouble at this kind of gathering, how could Yang Xianlu and the eternal prosperity celestial king tolerate it with their pride? If this elder wanted to make a move, a celestial king would definitely appear, and crush him into dust. Ling Han's eyes narrowed, and he declared, "Old demon blood shadow. Brat, I indeed did not have a wrong opinion of you. Initially, I had thought you would need 10 million years to be able to get the natural peach seal out for me. I had not thought that it would only take just a few years. Not bad, and now, hand it over to me," Old Demon Blood Shadow declared, his face filled with anticipation. Anyone would be afraid of death, what more this kind of mighty figure that was placed on a high pedestal. He had suffered greatly from the immortal's tribulation, and the next time it came, he would definitely be done for. Hence, he naturally longed incredibly for the natural peach seal, causing even him, a noble ascending origin tier, to lose his composure. Ling Han shrugged, and replied, "Sorry, it was already used." "You used?" Old Demon Blood Shadow stuttered. His first reaction was disbelief and inability to accept this fact. That was because he had placed all his hopes of survival on this, and suddenly hearing this abrupt announcement, his whole head had exploded. Then, he flew into a thunderous rage. "Brat, you actually dare to deceive me. You don't want your life anymore?" His gaze was menacing, exuding a strong killing intent. This brat actually dared to fool him. How could he be so outrageously bold? Xiao, right at this moment, a figure suddenly charged out, delivering a palm strike towards Ling Han. Z. Boundless lightning flickered brightly, its strength incredibly frightening. Ba Yao. He had already been waiting a very long time for Ling Han. The moment he saw Ling Han, he immediately made his move. He did not need that natural peach seal, so his attack was fatal, planning to kill Ling Han so that he could directly snatch the treasure that the latter possessed. Chapter 1930, Something Wrong with the Picture. Chapter 1930, Something Wrong with the Picture. "How dare you?" Old Demon Blood Shadow roared furiously, and he moved to attack Ba Yao. It was not that he treasured Ling Han's life, but rather because he did not know whether Ling Han had brought the natural peach seal out with him or not. If he had brought it out, then it was fine to kill Ling Han as he would simply have to take it. But if he had not, and it was still within Alchemy City, then what was the point of him going to so much trouble and effort? Moreover, he, too, suspected that Ling Han had a rare treasure in his possession. He had long since decided to kill Ling Han after he had gotten hold of the natural peach seal, and take all the great fortune that the latter had for himself, so he naturally could not possibly allow Ling Han to die in the hands of another. Thus, he immediately moved, and was extremely ruthless. Ba Yao paused slightly. This old bastard actually dared to make a move on him. "Have your damn eyes gone blind? Do you know who I am? You're courting death," he exclaimed coldly, and paid Old Demon Blood Shadow back with a punch of his own. Z. Lightning burst, turning into an extended river of electricity, countless seals of great Tao rippling within, frightening without bounds. Old Demon Blood Shadow paled in shock. They were both ascending origin tiers, but the gap between him and the other was practically indescribably wide. Peng! With this blow, Old Demon Blood Shadow was sent flying. His whole figure sprayed out a mist of blood, his aura declining continuously. He had merely reached small accomplishment in the ascending origin tier, but Ba Yao had reached consummate, and the gap between them was completely beyond logic. Old Demon Blood Shadow fell, and barely managed to steady his footing. His grey hair all wafted down to the ground. Initially, his hair was already scarce, and now his head had completely become bare, and he had become a baldai. His face was frighteningly pale, and his left eye was bulging out of his eye socket, appearing very ghastly. Pu. He threw up blood continuously, while his hair continued to drop. Lightning would be flickering in every mouthful of blood. This was because Ba Yarrow's attack was too terrifying, and had penetrated deep into his bones. Old Demon Blood Shadow couldn't help but pale in astonishment. In the first place, because of the Immortal's tribulation, his blood essence was already dried up. From the dashing handsome young man he had once been, he had become the old geezer he was now. And now, Ba Yarrow had directly damaged his life force with this blow. Every mouthful of blood he spat out was equivalent to him expending a sliver of his life force, and the old wounds that had resulted from the Immortal's tribulation were also restless, beginning to tear away at his cultivation. His aura suddenly dropped madly, from the Ascending Origin tier to Immortal Palace tier, 5th Palace, 4th Palace, 3rd Palace, and it did not stop even when it had dropped to the 1st Palace, dropping suddenly to the Dividing Soul tier, and falling further from Heaven Soul. Was this too much of an exaggeration? Not in the slightest. The consummate of Ascending Origin tier possessed the ability to kill a small accomplishment with a single strike in the first place, and while it had only been a casual strike from Ba Yarrow, how could one who had once been a holy son of the Thundercloud Palace be underestimated? Furthermore, Old Demon Blood Shadow was close to the finishing line of his lifespan, so how close could his present battle prowess be to the battle prowess he had in his prime? He had not been directly killed with a single strike. Instead, his cultivation level had declined, and this was already very, very good. Old Demon Blood Shadow's cultivation level dropped all the way until the middle stage of Yin Soul, and only then did he barely stop it. His limbs were all numb, an endless despair rising up within him. True, cultivation levels could be recultivated, and he could still cultivate from Yin Soul to Earth Soul, Heaven Soul, and all the way onwards. However, his life force was wounded once more, so how much longer did he have to live? 100 years. 10,000 years. Before he had reached the Ascending Origin tier, and broken through the Great Accomplishment level, made up for the lack of his life force, and regained an endless lifespan, he would have long since died. Which also meant that while Ba Yarrow had not killed him with this blow, it had already announced a death sentence for him. Old Demon Blood Shadow trembled. 100 million years would pass very soon, and it was possible that his current lifespan wasn't even up to 100 years, so how could he not tremble in fear? This seemed to be a very long time, but in truth was only the matter of 1 or 2 breaths. The process of their clash was even faster and astonishing, and severing mundane tiers practically could not distinguish clearly. What had happened? Everyone was a little stunned. Why did they feel like something was off with this picture? Hadn't the Old Demon Blood Shadow come to cause trouble for Ling Han? Why had he turned around and attacked on his behalf? And he had come out of it so badly at that. This was definitely true love. Ba Yarrow only cast a calm look at Old Demon Blood Shadow before withdrawing his gaze. Though the latter was also an Ascending Origin tier, he was just a minor character in his eyes. Aside from an Ascending Origin tier that had come out from a Celestial King tier force, who else was worth his serious notice? He had overestimated his own capabilities. He did not eradicate him, either. Even killing this kind of trash was merely a waste of his time. What you have, I am very interested in, Ba Yarrow said, staring at Ling Han. At first, Ba Yarrow had not wanted to waste words, and just wanted to directly kill Ling Han and snatch the treasure. After he plucked the latter's soul, there was no possibility that any secret could be hidden, but since he had now been stopped, and failed the first time, he would be frank and generous, unrushed and calm. After all, he was an Ascending Origin tier, so he still treasured his reputation. If he had succeeded with the previous blow, he would have directly left. He had absolute certainty that even Yang Xianlu had no hopes of distinguishing his appearance clearly and remembering his aura. So what? Ling Han asked smilingly, without the slightest sign of being afraid. Whatever they are, they now belong to me, Ba Yarrow stated calmly. Soundlessly, he had already locked the space in this area. This way, unless a Celestial King deliberately swept his divine sense in this area, there was no possible way that anyone could discover what happened here. This way, everything would be under his control. Ling Han shook his head. I don't think so. Brat, Do you still think that this is Alchemy City? B.A. Yarrow scoffed. There were too many heirs of celestial kings here. In fact, there was also a super prodigy like Yang Xianlu here. He naturally did not dare to commit murder randomly. But in Ling Han's case, he knew him very well. He was only a mere holy son of Alchemy City. So what if he killed him? Even if Alchemy City went off to the Thundercloud Palace to make a complaint, so what? What could they do to him? What a joke. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "This is indeed not Alchemy City, and my master is not here to stand up for me. However, there are really a lot of interesting and amazing things that would happen in this world." "Oh, like?" B.A. Yarrow asked carelessly as he strode towards Ling Han. His speed was not very fast, but every step he took was like great Tao pressing down, causing an indescribable discomfort to everyone's heart and internal organs. How was a severing mundane tear any match for the might of an ascending origin tear? He deliberately walked very slowly. That was because previously in Alchemy City, he had been forced away by Grandmaster Zi Cheng, and this was a humiliation to him. Now, though he was not seeking vengeance from alchemist Zi Cheng, Ling Han was the fundamental root of the whole issue. Before he killed him, he would torture him a bit, and this was slightly pleasing to him. Of course, this was completely because he had absolute certainty. Otherwise, he would have directly killed him, plucked out his soul, snatched the treasure, and left. Tong, tong, tong. One step after another, a considerable number immediately showed expressions of suffering. They felt as if their internal organs were about to explode. That was really the case. Under such terrifying pressure, every person's eyeballs were popping out, their expressions frighteningly twisted. "Damn it!" Hunyo was furious, pointing a finger at B.A. Yao. "Damn giant, you actually dare be fierce to Nyo's Ling Han, and dare to make Nyo feel discomfort. You are dead." B.A. Yarrow naturally would not take Hunyo's threat seriously. He only scoffed, and the eyes he turned towards Hunyo were slightly devious. He had never been one to abstain from women, especially now when he had been stagnating on ascending origin tier for too long. He had developed a great many hobbies, and the pleasures of the flesh naturally were one of them. Furthermore, it occupied a great portion of his time even. This young girl was both beautiful and pure. Though she was a little fierce, what use was that in front of him? "Oh, I am dead." B.A. Yarrow shook his head. "I don't believe it." "You should." An icy cold voice rang out behind B.A. Yarrow, holding a menacing killing intent. Chapter 1931, A Meaningless Death. Chapter 1931, A Meaningless Death. B.A. Yarrow was involuntarily astonished, and hurriedly turned around, seeing that a middle-aged beauty had unknowingly appeared behind him. All of a sudden, coldness rose up in his body as he felt every single hair rise on end. Impossible. He was an ascending origin tier elite, the strongest existence below celestial king tier, but he was actually completely unaware that a person had appeared behind him, so how could he not be dumbfounded? "Who are you?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. "Are you even worthy to ask?" Lu Herong asked calmly, her voice icy cold. This idiot actually dared to be insolent to her young imperial empress. Just how tired was he of living? "Nyo wants to smack him," Hunyo cried out, appearing incredibly indignant and infuriated. "You actually dare threaten Nyo's Ling Han. Nyo wants to beat you up into a pig's head, and then feed you to the dogs." Though she was still as violent as she had been, Ling Han breathed a slight sigh of relief. At least, this line was slightly more normal. She was no longer declaring wanting to feed a dog's head to the dogs. Lu Herong had completely no need to move at all. She only gave a light humph, and boom, the pressure of a celestial king that could move the 9 heavens surged out. Involuntarily, B.A. Yarrow's legs weakened, and he knelt. Whatever previous holy son, consummate of ascending origin tier. In front of a celestial king, this was all trash. B.A. Yarrow felt his whole body covered in cold sweat. He was really terrified now. All the prodigies also T-scared in amazement. They were all from celestial king tier level backgrounds, and it was not unusual that this had led to the arrival of a celestial king. However, celestial kings were the strongest existence in the celestial realm. Which of them was not an overwhelmingly proud ruler with their own domain? But looking at Hunyo's previous attitude, it was as if she was commanding a subordinate. Just who exactly are you? You are a little too extravagant, aren't you? Having a celestial king follow you even on your travels? Old Demon Bloodshadow also forgot to moan. He looked dumbly at Hunyo, and then looked at Ling Han, tremendous regret rising up in his heart. Ling Han actually had such a terrifying background. He felt like everything was so surreal. This was too unfathomable. Since you were so awesome, why had you gone to become the holy son of Alchemy City? Though Alchemy City was indeed very awesome, it could only take a leading role among 4-star forces at most, and barely could be considered a 5-star force of the lowest rank. Were you pretending to be a wolf in sheep's clothing? You screwed me over. He did not reflect on himself in the slightest, that it was he who had taken the initiative to trifle with Ling Han. Instead, he laid the blame for all the misfortune he had suffered on Ling Han, and thought that all of this was Ling Han's fault. With Hunyo's personality, she was naturally not going to be reserved about anything. She leaped over and sent a kick straight at B.A. Yarrow's face, kicking B.A. Yarrow onto the ground. Then, she stomped on him madly. She was furious. This guy not only dared to threaten Ling Han, but dared to have ideas about her beyond his station. This definitely could not be tolerated. Nyo was Ling Han's. Stomp, 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 Nyo will stomp him dead. B.A. Yarrow's cultivation level had been sealed off by Lu Herong. He could not possibly fight back. There was only a sliver of power left that was protecting his vitals. Thus, while he was battered and bruised from Hunyo's kicks, his wounds still immediately recovered. As long as there was not someone else's martial intent left in his body, every celestial could very quickly heal their physical body. In this way, he had become a perfect bullseye, allowing Hunyo to vent her anger as much as she liked without being broken. But while he would not break, it still hurt. Did you think an ascending origin tier felt no pain? B.A. Yarrow screamed out in pain. Every stomp from Hunyo's foot would result in a groove in his flesh. If there were bones beneath the flesh, his bones would definitely be broken. If it was an internal organ, the internal organ would also be crushed. See if Nyo won't kill you. Hunyo cursed as she continued to kick, looking completely like a little psycho. Everyone turned their gaze elsewhere. An incredibly exquisite beauty could actually be so violent. Even Lu Herong could not bear to watch any longer. With a wave of her hand, Celestial King tier regulations surged, and B.A. Yarrow's bones were directly crushed into dust that was blown away with the winds. He had turned into nothing, not even the slightest bit of him left behind. She had no wish for her young Imperial Empress to show how violent she could be in front of others again, so it was naturally best to eliminate B.A. Yarrow directly. This B.A. Yarrow had really died a meaningless death. If you could not bear watching, then wouldn't it be fine for you to just stop Hunyo? Why did you kill him? So how meaningless was his death? Everyone was looking at Lu Herong in astonishment. This was a celestial king, and even though she was only first heaven, she was still a supremely noble existence in front of them. In fact, a celestial king was a supreme noble wherever they were. Greetings, senior. All the prodigies bowed in respect. Even Yang Xianlu was no exception. This was the respect that an absolute elite deserved. If it was not for the fact that they, too, were heirs of celestial king tier sects, merely bowing was not enough. They would have to kneel to pay their greetings. Young Imperial Empress, can we go back now? Lu Herong looked at Hunyo. This little girl was so obstinate and determined, demanding to come out to find Ling Han. Now that she had finally found who she was looking for, her wish fulfilled, they naturally had to return. No. Hunyo wrapped her arms around Ling Han. At present, she was tall and had long legs, so this bare hug abruptly drove Ling Han's head into her breasts, yet she was completely unconcerned. Nyo wants to play with Ling Han. Play. 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 Lu Herong was speechless. While this young Imperial Empress had the mark of great Tao left behind by their last Imperial Empress, and was practically capable of advancing into 9th Heaven Celestial King tier lying down, this personality of hers really did not look the slightest bit like an elite's. Thankfully, this was the Eastern Celestial Realm, and they had brought a rare treasure with them, so they could conceal their destiny, preventing the predictions of other elites. It should be fine as long as they took extra caution. Then just let young Imperial Empress play around for a while. Otherwise, this girl was definitely capable of doing something more unthinkable. Thinking that, she did not make any further protest. In any case, she would just protect her from the shadows. Additionally, she also had another important mission, and that was to watch over Ling Han to prevent him from bringing ruin to their little princess. Brother Yang, then I will take my leave first. Allow me to return and make some preparations. Someone began to bid farewell to Yang Xianlu. Me too. Me too. Many of them wanted to first return to their own home bases and make some preparations. After all, they were heading to a natural mystery realm. Furthermore, they would be contesting with the prodigies of wide prosperity heaven. All of them could possibly be incredibly terrifying opponents for them. They respectfully bowed towards Lu Herong, and then walked backwards and left. Ling Han looked towards old demon Blood Shadow, anger rising in his heart. Old bastard, you call yourself an ascending origin tier? You actually wanted to launch a sneak attack on me. Is there anyone more shameless than you? He strode over. At first, I had planned to kill a shameless old bastard like you only after advancing into the ascending origin tier. However, from the looks of things, you would not be able to live until then anyways. Let us battle now then. Old demon Blood Shadow's vitality was extremely withered, and he would only be able to live for 100 or so years at most. In fact, it could even be just a few decades. Yin Soul. He could match that. Ling Han presently was equivalent to Yang Soul, but for a monarch tier like himself, how could it be that he did not have tier-surpassing battle prowess? Old demon Blood Shadow stared fixedly at Ling Han, showing a murderous expression. With a celestial king here, he definitely would not be able to get any benefit, but now that Ling Han had delivered himself straight onto his doorstep, this was a chance for him. He could capture Ling Han, and then use him to blackmail the Celestial King into handing over some super celestial pill to recover the damage to his life force, and in this way, he would be able to continue living. When this thought popped up, he could not hold back any longer. Boom, a blood shadow spread out, forming a mist behind him, and it was continuously vibrating like it had a life of its own. His cultivation level had indeed dropped, but Ling Han was really too arrogant, actually wanting to match him, a yin soul, when he himself was only a severing mundane tier. It should be known that there was a major tier separating the two of them. Chapter 1932. Chapter 1932, Explosion of Fury. Brat, come. Old demon Blood Shadow fluttered the blood shadow behind him, an abnormal rosiness rising up on his pallid face. His life force was greatly damaged. Actually, it was already a great challenge for him just to struggle at death's door. This battle would definitely cause his originally overwhelmingly short lifespan to become ever closer to the finishing line. But he had already considered this battle as the last hope for his continued survival. Now that he had thrown everything into the gamble, he naturally would not be concerned, either. Capture Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Old bastard, you would only be beat to bursting by my fists." Xiao, his figure charged out, and had already launched a punch in attack. Overestimating your own capabilities. Old demon Blood Shadow was proud. While his cultivation level had fallen, he was still at Yin Soul. Even if one ignored the major tier, he was still 2 minor levels higher than Ling Han. He stretched out his right hand that looked like a withered claw, and grabbed at Ling Han's right wrist. Wang, the stars in Ling Han's body shone, stimulating great Tao, and drawing on the power of regulation. Immediately, an ancient seal appeared on his fist, and from the surface, it looked like a ball of fire. This was a seal of great Tao that had been drawn from the 9 heavens flame, and was celestial king tier in level. What was unfortunate was that Ling Han's cultivation level was too low. This seal of great Tao was also incomplete, and exuded a feeling of ruin. However, an ancient, noble aura was subtly surging, shaking the 9 heavens. Old demon Blood Shadow's expression changed drastically. The might of this blow from Ling Han had actually far surpassed his expectations. A severing mundane tear could actually be as strong as this. Hang on. He suddenly recalled a legend. It was said that an ultimate prodigy would be able to break out of the binds of the heaven and earth, and deliver another strike after the fourth severance. Fifth severance, capable of matching Yang soul. Hiss, this guy was actually the kind of freak that only existed in myths. Old demon Bloodshadow was not to be blamed for being ignorant. Though he was an ascending origin tier, he had always been a loner. There was no great support or background behind him, so how could he possibly know of too many secrets? It was already impressive enough that he could realize that there were still fifth severance prodigies existing in this world. Wang. The grabbing motion of old demon Bloodshadow became slower and slower. That seal on Ling Han's fist had already taken effect, preventing him from invasion, and amidst an intense friction, flames began to burn on his palm. The old bastard was unconcerned, but when he pushed his hand further forwards, he discovered that his right hand was in overwhelming pain. The pain came from being burnt. Fire had not been ignited due to the strong friction, it was rather that the seal that Ling Han had formed had drawn upon the regulations of fire, which burnt his skin. Impossible. Old demon Bloodshadow paled in shock. Even if Ling Han was a fifth severance, which was equivalent to a Yang soul elite, he himself still had the cultivation level of Yin soul, so how could he possibly be wounded by Ling Han? Old bastard, the only reason why you could bully me was because your cultivation level was much higher than mine. To say nothing of a battle of equals, even if you are 2 levels higher than me, I will still be able to suppress you. Ling Han roared loudly, his figure suddenly charging while brandishing a fist that contained all his fury. The black murderous curse was indeed capable of tempering him, but having it forcibly planted into his body by someone else was naturally a completely different notion. Even though only a few years had passed, adding in the time that he had passed in the time cultivation chamber, that was a few hundred years of time, which meant that he had endured the agony that came when the black murderous curse activated a few hundred times. Every time it activated, Ling Han really wanted to pummel the old demon Bloodshadow. With all these times added together, his fury had also accumulated to the pinnacle, and now he was going to vent his fury to his heart's content. Peng. When his fist punched out, regulations became solid, and countless seals could be seen appearing, incredibly mysterious and profound. Ting, ting, ting. Both Ling Han and old demon Bloodshadow took a few steps back, and then regained their footing. In this exchange, they had both come out in a tie. Old demon Bloodshadow's expression was very ugly. At present, he had bet all his hopes on Ling Han. He wanted to capture him so he could use him to blackmail a celestial king, but Ling Han was actually so strong that his wishful thinking had completely fallen short. His lifespan was possibly just 100 years, and furthermore, he was presently burning his limited life force to continue the battle. Who knew, he could directly die whilst he was still in the middle of battle. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to die. The old bastard roared. Boom, the blood shadow behind him surged madly, and then turned into a hurricane that blasted towards Ling Han. When it was channeled for a certain distance, this hurricane actually dispersed, turning into black dots that filled the skies. Ling Han's eyes swept over it, and saw that these black dots were actually multiple insects that filled the skies with their numbers, buzzing madly. Each bug did not look much different from a mosquito, but they were considerably bigger, as big as a pinky. They had a long stinger, which was incredibly sharp, and shone with a metallic brilliance. The insects flew all over in the skies, falling down towards Ling Han. And in that short instant, Ling Han was covered by mosquitoes, all of them using their sharp stings to pierce him, wanting to suck his blood. Ling Han did not move. He wanted to see if these things could do anything to his physique. Old demon Bloodshadow showed a cold smirk. This brat was too arrogant, and had completely no idea that these blood shadow insects were his trump card technique. Furthermore, they could work together with the black murderous curse. While the blood shadow insects were attacking, he would activate the black murderous curse, and it would be a coordinated attack. If you only bothered about the inside of your body, the blood shadow insects would penetrate your body and devour your blood essence. These blood shadow insects were actually formed from his divided soul. Whatever blood essence they sucked could be fed back to him. Though it would not recover his life force, it did have some slight bit of nutrition. And if you were only bothered about the surface of your body, the black murderous curse would similarly be able to take your life. What old demon Blood Shadow had to ensure was that he did not activate the black murderous curse too powerfully in a moment of carelessness, and directly kill Ling Han off. If he did, he would not be able to blackmail that celestial king. Explode! Old demon Blood Shadow exclaimed. Ling Han felt a jolt in his heart, and his entire person was assaulted with indescribable agony. Karkaka, did you think that the black murderous curse would only activate once a year? Old demon Blood Shadow scoffed. Since I was the one who planted this black murderous curse, then as long as I will it can activate at any time. Now, kneel in front of me. The old bastard was very proud of himself when he suddenly revealed an expression of disbelief. That was because Ling Han was standing completely unperturbed, and did not show any pained expression. Furthermore, not one of the blood shadow insects managed to penetrate the latter's skin, as if that was not a human standing there, but rather a slab of divine metal. Impossible. Why, you, only now did old demon Blood Shadow feel his heart and spirit tremble. Firstly, he did not dare believe this, and secondly, he would not be able to capture Ling Han like this, and that would mean that he was not far from death. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, I have already experienced the black murderous curse several hundred times, and have long become capable of enduring it. Freak. Old demon Blood Shadow completely could not believe this. Just how overwhelming and agonizing was the black murderous curse. This was not a technique that he had created, but had rather been gained from an ancient cave. It was highly possible that it had been created by a celestial king. He had used it before on a great many people who had declared that their willpower was as strong as steel, but it would be 3 times at most, and each one of them would be wailing for mercy, and he could command them to do whatever he wished. For example, there was a person who supposedly loved his wife madly, and when he could no longer endure the black murderous curse, he still killed his beloved wife. There was an immortal palace tier elite who was chaste and pure, and after she had been planted with the black murderous curse, she suppressed the humiliation and entered into a brothel, where lowly cultivators played with her to their heart's content. This caused old demon Blood Shadow to be filled with confidence in the black murderous curse. There was no one that could withstand the agony that came after the curse activated. Chapter 1933, Shamelessness that knows no bounds. Chapter 1933, Shamelessness that knows no bounds. But in Ling Han's case, he had endured several hundred times of the curse activating. It should be known that only 4 to 5 years had passed, and the black murderous curse should only have activated 4 to 5 times, so how could there be as many as several hundred times? There was only one possibility. Ling Han had entered into the time cultivation chamber, and thus, while only 4 to 5 years had passed in the normal time flow, he had gone through as many as a few hundred years. Was there any other person like that? The black murderous curse was clearly so agonizing, capable of making a person whose willpower was strong as steel become obedient. And this was also the reason why old demon Blood Shadow had allowed Ling Han to go to Alchemy City without any worry. He was sure that Ling Han would definitely obediently do as he commanded. Who would have thought that this freak actually thought that the activation of the black murderous curse was too infrequent, and actually took his own initiative to enter into the time cultivation chamber to suffer? Old demon Blood Shadow was dumbfounded. He had never met anyone like Ling Han before. Was this human? This was practically divine metal that had taken human form. Just die then. Madness streaked through old demon Blood Shadow's eyes. Since he could not capture Ling Han, and was destined to die, then he might as well kill Ling Han so at least there would be some company for him in death. Die. He stretched open his right hand, as if he was pulling on invisible strings. He activated the black murderous curse to the fullest, planning to kill Ling Han. However, after the word die, there was only the soft whistle of the wind. Ling Han was still standing, completely unperturbed. This. How is this possible? The fact that Ling Han could withstand the pain that came from the activation of the black murderous curse only meant that he had a frightening willpower, but old demon Blood Shadow was presently launching a fatal attack from the black murderous curse. This had nothing to do with willpower, and would directly kill his victim. "Why are you not dead?" Ling Han broke into a grin, and raised his right foot. He took a step forwards, and as his foot landed, a large mass of blood shadow insects was shaken off from his body. Before they even landed on the ground, they had turned back to regulations and dispersed. They were not solid creatures, but rather formed from the divided soul of old demon blood shadow gathering the regulations of heaven and earth. "Old bastard, don't forget. You are more or less at yin soul level by now, so how much power would you be able to draw from the black murderous curse?" Ling Han asked calmly. His physique was extremely tough, so how could a yin soul level attack be capable of killing him? Old demon blood shadow was completely tongue-tied, unable to speak. "Don't say it like it's so easy. Even if you are a fifth severance, which is comparable to young soul, you are still a minor level inferior to me. Furthermore, the black murderous curse is already planted, and would directly activate within your body. Even if our cultivation levels were equal, you would still be easily killed. What more when my cultivation level is completely superior to yours?" Just what kind of freak had he trifled with? The old bastard was presently filled with regret. Initially, there was still more than 100 million years to his lifespan, but now? First, his life force was seriously wounded, and then he went into battle by burning the remnants of his life force, which was courting his own death. If the heavens gave him another chance, he would definitely stay far away from Ling Han. No, he would directly kill this guy, and take the treasure he had by force. Old demon blood shadow was increasingly sure that Ling Han had to have an astonishing treasure on him. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so strong? Even when things have come so far, you still haven't given up on your evil intentions. Ling Han humphed coldly as he strode forwards. Masses of blood shadow insects dropped, and his whole person was soon completely revealed, standing erect as a spear. "I will send you on your way to the afterlife." Ling Han gave a battle cry. The 9 heavens flame flared, and he turned into a god of fire, blasting out towards old demon blood shadow. King Tears were invincible within their cultivation level, and Emperor Tears could still be invincible even with a gap of a single cultivation level. Then, what about Monarch Tears? Invincible even with a gap of 2 levels. The 5th severance could be considered as Yang Soul in a different sense, but it still ultimately was not Yang Soul. Hence, there would definitely be some influence on Ling Han's tier-surpassing battle prowess. Thus, against a dividing soul tier, he was still unable to maintain invincibility with the gaps of 2 minor levels, but surpassing 1 level was easily done, what more when old demon blood shadow was at the end of his rope. With him putting his full effort in now, old demon blood shadow immediately fell into a disadvantage. "Don't kill me," old demon blood shadow wailed. "I don't have that many years to live. Spare my life so I can handle my posthumous matters." Ling Han only felt that this was outrageous. Just how shameless was this old bastard? To even say such words, his shamelessness really knew no bounds. But upon further thought, this old bastard had ambushed Ling Han, and planted a curse on him so he could steal the natural peach seal for him, which was already enough proof of his utter shamelessness. "You had best go on your way to the afterlife sooner so that you won't harm others." Ling Han was completely merciless, every strike fatal. "Ah, I'll kill you." Old demon blood shadow burst the last bit of his life force, but even so, he was no match for Ling Han, and was still pummeled by him. Furthermore, his life force was already pitifully little in the first place, and now throwing everything onto the line like this was only temporary, and very soon, it was completely expended. "I resent this. Hate. Hate." The old bastard, too, knew he was soon done for, and roared at the skies. He simply gave up any form of resistance now. You call yourself a prodigy of your generation, so how could you bring yourself to make a move on one who won't fight back? Fuck. Initially, Ling Han had thought that he already knew that this old bastard's shamelessness was completely without bounds, but he had never thought that he could surpass his imagination. Because he was no match for Ling Han, he actually dared to say indignantly that he was not even fighting back. How could he be so shameless to make such a declaration? Ling Han didn't even bother to say anything in denial anymore, and simply shot out a punch. "The earlier you fuck die, the sooner this can be over with." But while old demon Blood Shadow said he was not fighting back, when he saw a punch flying towards him, he still stepped back and stretched out his arms to parry. This. To say nothing of the fact that Ling Han was speechless, even Yang Xianlu and the others did not know what else to say. This old bastard had once been an ascending origin tier elite, so how could he be so shameless? He was so shameless that it was world-shaking. Disgusting. Ling Han's fiery punches landed repeatedly, and after over a dozen punches, old demon Blood Shadow was forcibly blasted into dust. Old demon Blood Shadow's lingering spirit had not dispersed, and was still floating in the skies. It was filled with yearning for life, but because the spirit had no base, it soon dispersed without a trace, and was completely erased from this world. Ling Han, let's go play. Hunyao ran over, hanging onto one of Ling Han's arms, her face bearing a dazzling smile. The Empress also walked over, and held Ling Han's other arm to show her sovereignty. Facing other women, the Empress had always been calm, but Hunyao did indeed make her feel pressured. You witch, let go of Nyo's Ling Han, Hunyao declared in jealousy. The Empress merely swept a disdainful eye over her, and ignored her. She had no interest in arguing with this kind of little girl. Why Yaya, Nyo is going to die of fury. Hunyao flew into a thunderous rage, her eyes shining with ferocity, blazing with killing intent. Ling Han could only step in as mediator, and pacified Hunyao. Brother Ling, looks like you are going to be very busy. Then, I will just keep it short. There is about 10 years' time until the mystery realm opens, so you can make some preparations. If you could reach the peak stage of the 5th severance before that, that would be best, Yang Xianlu said. He then added, never underestimate the prodigies of wide prosperity heaven. Only if you have reached the peak stage of 5th severance could you possibly match them. Previously, he had exchanged 10 strikes with Ling Han, and he surmised that he had the upper hand. But even he was no match for Shishouwen, so Ling Han naturally was even less likely to be a match. Ling Han only nodded, and did not say that his true strength lay in his physique. Furthermore, he had not used the 2 source powers of 9 Heavens Flame and Shenyan Source Water, either, and also had the Black Tower, which made up 3 types of supreme level regulations. The other had spoken true. He did indeed need to reach the peak stage of 5th severance as soon as possible. If he could avoid using external help, then it was best for him not to. Then, we will meet again at the 3 Blooms Valley. Chapter 1934, Third Senior Brother. Chapter 1934, Third Senior Brother. Ling Han left with the Empress and Hunyao in tow. Meanwhile, Lu Herong could not bear how Hunyao kept clinging to Ling Han, and decisively hid in the shadows. Without seeing or hearing them, she wouldn't feel annoyed. However, the moment Hunyao encountered danger, she would definitely appear at the first moment. Ayo, that's right. Ling Han clapped a hand on his forehead. With a wave of his right hand, bewitching maiden Ru was thrown out of his spatial god tool. Though this bewitching maiden could indeed exit on her own, she did not know the situation outside. If they were still on 3 Yang Peak, it was possible that she would die immediately as soon as she came out. Bewitching maiden Ru was stunned for a moment, and then looked strangely at Ling Han. This guy actually gave her such a precious treasure, without a single prior condition. In fact, he did not even ask her to thank him. This actually made her feel very touched. After so many days, she had naturally refined the heavenly Dao Jade fully, compensating for the shortcomings in her cultivation. Striking herself had become delivering strikes at the heaven and earth, and she had become an emperor tier, and a top-tier emperor tier at that. But she immediately showed an expression of astonishment because she had spotted Hunyao. There was actually an exquisite beauty that could match the Empress in this world. Meanwhile, Hunyao's jealousy soured. She glared fiercely at bewitching maiden Ru, and exclaimed, Ling Han, you're so mean. It's not enough that you have such a witch, you have a vixen too. Ling Han chuckled, and said, don't be willful. This is just a friend. Bewitching maiden Ru showed a meaningful smile, and said, oh, just a friend. This smile was enchantingly beautiful. Vixen, if you dare to smile again, Nyo will chop off your vixen head. Hunyao threatened angrily. Young Master Ling, she's so fierce. Bewitching maiden Ru said, and deliberately hid behind Ling Han, looking delicate and fragile. "Damn you! Damn you!" Hu Niu yelled in fury, her viciousness on full display. "Don't tease her, or you'll get yourself killed," the Empress said. Even she did not have the confidence to defeat Hu Niu, what more a weaker opponent like bewitching Maiden Ru. The reason why she had said this was because Hu Niu really would commit murder, and she did not want Ling Han to lose an excellent aid for his cultivation. Bewitching Maiden Ru also felt slight regret. That look from Hu Niu, that expression definitely showed that she was extremely ferocious, and it was not just merely joking around. But she was also slightly defiant. Aside from not having advanced into the fifth severance, bewitching Maiden Ru was definitely a top-grade existence in the severing mundane tier. Why did she have to be afraid of Hu Niu? She can suppress you with a single finger. Ling Han nodded. Hu Niu is a fifth severance, and may be slightly stronger than even me. After all, he had just advanced into the fifth severance, while Hu Niu was already at the fifth severance's peak stage. The fifth severance. Instantly, bewitching Maiden Ru could only yield. Her cultivation was focused on charm technique, and charm techniques did not only seduce men. She had a glib tongue, and chose the words that Hu Niu liked to hear, such as how much Ling Han liked her, how he had missed her very much, and so on. Immediately, the little girl bared her mouth in a cheerful grin. "Vixen, don't think that Niu doesn't know you are just sucking up. But seeing as you're not too bad, Niu will spare you just this once," Hu Niu declared casually. She was not the slightest bit dumb. Ling Han released the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, which naturally caused Hu Niu to once more have a bout of jealousy. Only after Ling Han had picked her up and comforted for a good while was her anger appeased. After all, they had been apart too long, and she had missed him dearly. Meanwhile, the two children made Hu Niu laugh loudly, and exclaim that they were interesting. They returned to Alchemy City. With the Dragonhawk as their mode of transport, their speed naturally increased greatly. They had reached Alchemy City in just over a month's time. Ling Han went to meet Grandmaster Zi Cheng, and explained the situation in simple words. Then, he went into seclusion again. There were too many things that he had to do. First, he had to increase his abilities in alchemy, and advance to 3 stars as soon as possible. Secondly, he also had to cultivate, and reach the peak stage of the fifth severance. After the journey to the mystery realm, he was going to break through to the dividing soul tier. In the celestial realm, one would have to travel to a specific location to advance to the next major tier, and in the case of the dividing soul tier, he would have to go to different places to break through to all 4 of the minor levels, unlike the severing mundane tier, where he only had to do so for the first severance, and not for the other severances. Similar to the severing mundane tier, there were very many places where one could break through to the dividing soul tier, and breaking through at different places would also have a great influence on one's future battle prowess. Hence, he definitely had to choose the best location for his breakthrough. Ling Han had already begun to study this problem. With the Black Tower, and with the help of the reincarnation tree, this day should not be too far away. The Empress and Hu Niu would occasionally glare at each other, both wanting to suppress the other, especially in Hu Niu's case. She had repeatedly wanted to secretly make a move, and kill off the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han managed to stop her all these times. The two women had fought a battle, and it was natural that it was Hu Niu that had won. Furthermore, her advantage was extremely great. Firstly, it was because the Empress had just advanced into fifth severance, and secondly, Hu Niu was indeed superior in terms of celestial technique, physique, and natural talent in cultivation. It was not unjust that the Empress had lost. However, after this battle, the animosity between the two women had instead dispersed. Though they could not be considered great friends, they had reached a certain tacit agreement, and no longer glared at each other day and night. Ling Han was relieved, and focused on alchemy and advancing to the peak stage of the fifth severance. Inside the Black Tower, he had another 3 supreme regulations, but what was unfortunate was that Ling Han was the only one who could comprehend them, and others could not benefit from them, which caused Ling Han to feel slight disappointment. However, the Black Tower also had the power of time now, and the acceleration rate of 1,000 times was extremely astonishing. Though there were 10 years, taking into consideration issues like travel time, they still had to set out ahead of time. Hence, it would more or less be around 9 years. 9 years would mean close to 330,000 years worth of time to comprehend Tao, and the acceleration of time would mean close to 9,000 years, which was an extremely extensive period of time. Bewitching Maiden Ru was also considered to have passed the test, so Ling Han tossed her into the Black Tower as well. To friends, Ling Han had never been petty. Surprisingly, Lu Herong did not step out to stop them, and would only occasionally appear in Ling Han's residence, looking at where the Black Tower was while thinking pensively. After 7 years in real time, Ling Han had still not advanced to become a 3-star alchemist, but in terms of spirit refinement, he had had a breakthrough, and had advanced to the level of 3rd refinement. Whether it was cultivation or alchemy, advancing a step further would be increasingly harder and harder the further one went. Ling Han could not help but admit that 3-star alchemists were still very valuable. It was no wonder that 4th refinement was the lifetime limit for the majority of alchemists. It was very difficult for him to improve even when he had spent so much time on this. However, if other alchemists were to know that he was complaining like this, they would definitely fly into fury. You only took hundreds of thousands of years, and you actually dared to complain? Then how were the majority of alchemists supposed to endure this? 9 years later, Ling Han and his group exited the Black Tower. There would of course not be much change in the appearance of a celestial, and the changes in Shalei and Shi Yu were more obvious. They had grown to look like youths in their teens. They had not used any time acceleration effects, or they would have long since become adults. Ling Han did not want them to miss out on their youth. At least, they should enter their 20th year under the normal time flow. Only 9 years had passed in the outside world. It was natural that there was not much change in Alchemy City, and those previous holy sons and holy daughters had all kept a low profile. With Grandmaster Zi Cheng watching over things, who would dare cause trouble? Ling Han prepared to set out, but before he managed to depart, he was summoned by Grandmaster Zi Cheng first. "Come, let me introduce someone. This is your nephew," Grandmaster Zi Cheng said smilingly, pointing at a middle-aged man ahead. Peng Huanyan, 3rd's disciple, and is already a 3-star alchemist. Chapter 1935, Contempt. Chapter 1935, Contempt. Alchemist Zi Cheng had a total of 3 disciples. Ex-disciples. Because they were too seriously influenced by him, if they continued to stay by his side, it would forever be impossible for them to surpass him. Thus, Alchemist Zi Cheng had long since discharged these 3 disciples. Not that he held no affection for them, but rather he hoped they could have brighter futures. His 3rd disciple was named Zhu Feng, and had long since become a 4-star alchemist. However, in terms of spirit refinement, he had attained 5th refinement, so he could barely be considered a grandmaster, but there was still a very far distance between him and Alchemist Zi Cheng. Peng Huanyan glanced at Ling Han, a sliver of disdain appearing in his eyes. A mere 2-star alchemist, what right did he have to be called uncle by him? That was really too much of a joke. However, with Grandmaster Zi Cheng in front of him, he did not dare be insolent. After all, this was the strongest alchemist in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm, and there was none that could compare. Even the 2 alchemists, Heavenly Heart and Chu Yi, were inferior to him, and those 2 alchemists had attained 6th refinement. Hence, Peng Huanyan could only reluctantly say, "Greetings, 4th uncle." If it was not for the fact that Zhu Feng thought extremely highly of Grandmaster Zi Cheng, and was filled with incredible respect for him, he would really want to turn around and leave. As a noble 3-star alchemist, he was compelled to actually address a 2-star alchemist as uncle. He could not bear the embarrassment. He was slightly confused. It was clear that Zhu Feng was already a 4-star alchemist, and had now even advanced to the level of 6th refinement. Furthermore, he was a disciple that Grandmaster Zi Cheng had discharged, so why was he still filled with such reverence towards Grandmaster Zi Cheng, and had deliberately urged him to observe the etiquette as befitting of a grand disciple? Ling Han saw this, but merely smiled, and said, "Nephew Peng." When the word nephew entered his ears, Peng Huanyan naturally was even more displeased, his expression dark. Grandmaster Zi Cheng smiled, and said to Ling Han, "3rd has finally broken through, advancing from 5th refinement to 6th refinement. Huanyan has deliberately come to inform me. Ian, you go on my behalf. You apprentice brothers should meet each other. Understood. Ling Han said solemnly. Peng Huanyan could not help himself, and interrupted, isn't fourth uncle a little too young? Can he bear such a heavy responsibility? Grandmaster Zi Cheng was immediately displeased. Firstly, this was his arrangement, and secondly, Ling Han was his beloved youngest disciple. What right do you have to express doubt? Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea what it means to respect your seniors? However, ultimately, he had indeed discharged Yufeng, and only in name was he still Peng Huanyan's grandmaster, so it would not be appropriate to be too strict. Thus, he only glared at Peng Huanyan, a very imposing air exuding from him. Peng Huanyan's heart immediately jolted, a sense of indescribable coldness welling up in his heart. To say nothing of the fact that Grandmaster Zi Cheng was a king tier among 4-star alchemists, who no one in the Eastern Celestial Realm could compare to, and had an extremely high position, just the fact that he was an ascending origin tier elite meant the might of that glare was nothing that a mere dividing soul tier could bear. He lowered his head, and felt like his whole body was shivering. His discomfort could not be described, and he almost fell onto his knees in a moment of weakness. Go and pack up a bit, Grandmaster Zi Cheng said smilingly to Ling Han. He was indescribably fond of this youngest disciple, and the fact that he had Ling Han represent him to congratulate Yufeng on advancing into 6th refinement was also a kind of announcement that Ling Han was his heir, and could represent him in all respects. Ling Han nodded, and asked Peng Huanyan, when do we set out? The distance of this journey is not short, so it is best to set out in the next few days. Grandmaster Zi Cheng interrupted, help me pass this vial of abundant origin pills to third. It would be my celebratory gift to him. He took out an alchemy vial, which he handed over to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, took the vial, and stowed it away. Peng Huanyan involuntarily showed an expression of envy. Abundant origin pill was the highest grade among 4-star alchemical pills. If an ascending origin tier took it, it could increase their source power. It was an incredibly precious alchemical pill, and even one was exorbitantly valuable. I will make some preparations, and we can set out tomorrow, Ling Han said to Peng Huanyan. He was not asking for the other's opinion, but merely informing him. He was the uncle here, so he naturally could directly decide this kind of issue. There was no need for him to discuss with the other party. Peng Huanyan's displeased expression became even more pronounced, but because Grandmaster Zi Cheng was still here, he did not dare say a word. Mentally, he swore that after they set out, he would definitely deal with this uncle, and curb his spirit. Otherwise, wouldn't this brat become tyrannical when they reached Guanhua City? Ling Han saw this, but only smiled faintly, and did not take it to heart. The two of them took their leave from Grandmaster Zi Cheng, and then left. When Ling Han told this to the Empress, Hu Niu, and the others, everyone agreed in unison that they were to go together to offer congratulations to Grandmaster Yufeng. Thankfully, Guanhua City is not too far from the Three Blooms mountain pass where we agreed to meet Yang Xianlu. It's just about a month or so away, and we can completely make it in time. After Ling Han did some calculation, he nodded. He could make it to both locations very easily. Godfather, we want to go too, Shalei and his sister exclaimed. Actually, it was unknown which of the two of them was older. Thus, the two of them had always argued with flushed faces, and had even come to blows over the issue of who was older. For the time being, Shalei was slightly at an advantage. All right, we will go together, Ling Han said with a smile. In the end, he had not taken these two kids as his disciples, but had rather adopted them as his godchildren, and was also nurturing these two kids with great care as well. Though only a dozen or so years had passed, this pair of siblings had already advanced into the heavenly body tier. This was firstly because the resources in the celestial realm were too abundant, and secondly, they had the reincarnation tree, which was endlessly shortening the time they spent on comprehension. Additionally, the physique of this pair of siblings was too good, containing a sliver of source power of heaven and earth, so when they cultivated, it would be half the work with twice the effect. After a day of preparations, they set out on their journey, heading towards Guanhua City. This time, They did not ride the Dragonhawk, but rather went on the water route. They had a water shuttle as their means of transport. It was not too big, only 15 meters long and 3 meters wide. It had been fortified by certain formations, so its speed was astonishingly rapid. However, the moment they boarded the water shuttle, Peng Huanyan immediately switched to a different expression, appearing to be incredibly proud. There were a total of 3 rooms on the vessel. After he had taken the largest one for himself, he did not bother with Ling Han and his group any further. The water shuttle could steer itself, and had no need of manual control, or someone to keep an eye on it. Ling Han, Niu will go and beat him up, Hu Niu said in displeasure. Forget it. For the sake of third senior brother, there is no need for us to drop to his level, Ling Han said. After all, Ling Han was the senior here, and he had not even seen his third senior brother yet, so if he did beat up the latter's disciple, it would not be too appropriate. Hu Niu pouted, her eyes looking from side to side. Clearly, there was no way she was going to give up the matter just like that. The journey was quiet, and after about 3 months, they had exited the calm peace heaven, and entered into the wide prosperity heaven. After entering into the wide prosperity heaven, and traveling for about half a month's time, they finally arrived at Guanhua City. This was a celestial king-tier city. The master of Guanhua City was Universal Cloud's celestial king, who had already attained 4th heaven in the celestial king tier. Guanhua City was the main base of the Universal Cloud's sect that the Universal Cloud's celestial king had established. The area under the reign of the Universal Cloud's sect comprised as many as tens of thousands of cities, and the size of their territory was astonishingly huge. After the group disembarked from the water shuttle, they entered into Guanhua City. Alchemist Peng. When they saw Peng Huanyan, the guards at the city gates all approached, ingratiating expressions on their faces. Alchemists truly had such outstanding status. Peng Huanyan showed an expression of arrogance, and deliberately glanced at Ling Han, his intention of showing his authority incredibly clear. See, this is how a 3-star alchemist is treated, and that is how awesome I am. Are you worthy of my calling you uncle? Are you worthy? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,